could your son be alive in your basement?
I have no idea.
There is something strangely comforting about live television. We invite these broadcasters into our living rooms every single day, expecting the usual routine of morning news, traffic updates, and local events. It feels safe. It feels controlled. But live television is entirely unscripted reality, operating without a safety net, and when the unpredictable happens, there is no editing room to cut it out and no censor button fast enough to shield the audience from the horror. Millions of people sitting on their couches suddenly become helpless witnesses to real-time nightmares. Today, we are pulling back the curtain on 4 of the most deeply disturbing and terrifying moments ever caught on live TV footage. These are the broadcasts that started exactly like any other day, but within the blink of an eye turned into scenes of absolute chaos, leaving an entire nation completely paralyzed with fear. We begin on what was supposed to be a beautiful, calm morning on August 26, 2015. The sun was just starting to rise over Bridgewater Plaza near the incredibly scenic Smith Mountain Lake in Virginia. A local news affiliate had sent out a young, bright-eyed reporting team to cover a lighthearted story about local tourism. The reporter was 24-year-old Allison Parker, known for her vibrant energy and warm on-screen presence. Behind the lens was 27-year-old cameraman Adam Ward, a dedicated professional who was always meticulously focused on getting the perfect shot. Together, they were interviewing a local Chamber of Commerce director. It was exactly the kind of wholesome, everyday news segment you would watch while pouring your morning coffee. The camera rolled, the interview began, and everything felt completely ordinary. But just outside the frame of that camera, hidden in the early morning shadows, a predator was quietly approaching. This person had stalked them to this exact location, carrying a loaded weapon and waiting for the precise moment the red light on the camera turned on. As the interview progressed and the reporter smiled at her guest, the silence of the morning was shattered. The terrifying sound of gunfire erupted on live television.
Okay, not sure what happened there. We will, of course, let you know as soon as we find out what those sounds were from.
The camera violently shook as the operator fell, capturing a horrifying, split-second image of the armed attacker before crashing onto the wooden deck. The live feed abruptly cut back to the news anchor sitting comfortably in the studio, her face instantly turning pale as she struggled to comprehend the real-life horror she and thousands of viewers had just witnessed. The immediate aftermath was a scene of pure devastation. First responders rushed to the plaza, but tragically, both the young reporter and the cameraman had already lost their lives. The woman they were interviewing was severely injured, but incredibly managed to survive by playing dead. The attacker had vanished completely, leaving behind no immediate clues. However, a meticulous review of the drop camera's final broadcast frame revealed a blurry yet unmistakable face. The man who committed this atrocity was not a random stranger. It was 41-year-old Vester Lee Flanagan, a former reporter who used to work at the exact same television station under the name Bryce Williams. This revelation sent a chilling shockwave through the investigation. This was not a random act of violence. It was a deeply calculated, cold-blooded execution fueled by extreme paranoia and vengeance. Digging into his past revealed a highly disturbing pattern. For years, he had been a walking nightmare in the workplace. He had a severe history of explosive anger, extreme bullying, and completely unpredictable behavior. He had been fired from multiple stations for physically threatening his own colleagues over the smallest, most insignificant disagreements. When he was finally terminated from this particular station in 2013, he completely lost his grip on reality. He had to be escorted out by the police, screaming and threatening the very people who had tried to work with him. Instead of taking responsibility for his aggressive actions, he began to brew a toxic, suffocating hatred for his former co-workers, obsessively blaming them for ruining his life. The true extent of his twisted mind was revealed mere hours after the morning broadcast. While the entire country was desperately searching for him, he sent a massive, rambling 23-page manifesto to a national news outlet. In it, he described himself as a human powder keg that was finally ready to explode. But he didn't stop there. In a move that showcased his complete lack of humanity, he actually uploaded a point-of-view video of the attack to his own social media profiles, ensuring that his horrific revenge would be seen by the entire world. The intense nationwide manhunt came to a sudden, dramatic end just hours later on a Virginia highway. When police finally cornered his rental car after a high-speed pursuit, they found that the disgruntled ex-employee had taken his own life, closing the darkest chapter in modern broadcast history. For our next story, we move to June 2014, a time when the entire city of Detroit, Michigan was gripped by a heartbreaking mystery. A 12-year-old boy named Charlie had vanished from his home without a single trace. For 11 agonizing days, his father, Charles, painted the picture of a man utterly destroyed by grief. He organized neighborhood search parties, plastered missing posters on every corner of the city, and pleaded with local law enforcement to bring his boy home. The FBI was brought in, search dogs scoured the area, but the child seemed to have evaporated into thin air. Desperate to keep the story in the national spotlight, the grieving father agreed to appear on a highly viewed live true crime television show hosted by Nancy Grace. This was supposed to be his final emotional plea to the American public. He sat in front of the camera, looking exhausted and desperate, ready to beg anyone with information to come forward. But live television has a strange way of unraveling the truth in real time. Right in the middle of this highly emotional interview, the host's earpiece buzzed with breaking news. What happened next was a moment of television history that left millions of viewers completely speechless.
How could your son be alive in your basement?
I have no idea.
The host stopped the interview and announced live on air that the missing 12-year-old boy had just been found, but he wasn't found in a ditch or an abandoned building or in another state. He was found alive, hidden deep inside his own father's basement.
Sir, did you check your basement?
I checked my basement, the FBI checked my basement, my wife checked my basement.
The reaction that followed is something psychologists and body language experts have studied for years. If you tell a grieving father that his missing child has just been found alive in his own home, you would expect an immediate outburst of overwhelming joy. You would expect him to rip the microphone off, burst into tears, and sprint out of the studio to hold his son. But Charles did none of that. Instead, he froze. He began hyperventilating, aggressively shaking his head, and immediately went on the defensive. He nervously stuttered, trying to justify himself, claiming that he, the police, the FBI, and his wife had searched that basement multiple times. He seemed far more concerned with protecting his own reputation than celebrating the incredible survival of his son. And as investigators dug deeper, the sinister truth behind the disappearance was finally dragged out of the dark. The boy had never run away. He had never been kidnapped by a stranger. When police executed a surprise search warrant, they found the child huddled behind a massive barricade of heavy boxes and barrels in the darkest corner of the basement. He was terrified. When questioned, the deeply traumatized boy revealed that his stepmother had forced him into that hiding spot, explicitly ordering him not to make a single sound no matter who came looking for him. The parents had orchestrated the entire disappearance. But why? The investigation revealed a household built on extreme authoritarian control. The young boy was entirely cut off from the outside world, homeschooled, and forced to endure grueling militaristic physical training routines every single day, doing hundreds of push-ups and sit-ups until he collapsed. He was found with severe cuts and bruises covering his body, painting a grim picture of relentless physical abuse. By faking his disappearance, the parents had likely hoped to exert total, unchecked control over his existence without any interference from the outside world. Both parents were immediately arrested. The child was permanently removed from their toxic grip and placed in a safe environment, leaving the public entirely disgusted by the twisted manipulation they had just witnessed on live television. Our third story takes us to the bitter cold evening of November 19th, 2014 in Rockville, Maryland. Sirens wailed through the night as the local fire department raced toward a massive inferno. A large two-story residential home was being completely consumed by towering flames. The fire was so intense and aggressive that it took crews over an hour just to prevent it from spreading to the neighboring houses. Property damage was escalating toward $500,000. As with any major local disaster, news crews quickly arrived on the scene. A reporter was standing just a few yards away from the blazing ruins, broadcasting the terrifying visuals live to the local community. Usually in situations like this, investigators take weeks to sift through the wet ash and charred wood to determine if a fire was caused by a faulty wire, a gas leak, or something more sinister. But on this bizarre night, the police didn't have to look for clues. The answer literally walked right up to the camera. While the reporter was speaking, a 27-year-old man named Carlos Peralta casually wandered into the frame. With an eerily calm demeanor, completely unfazed by the blazing inferno lighting up the night sky behind him, he looked at the journalist and made an unprompted, jaw-dropping confession on live television.
Me, I set it on fire. I just poured gasoline on the floor, set it on fire, and went to buy a drink and came back.
The reporter was absolutely stunned, initially thinking it was a sick joke, but Carlos did not hesitate to elaborate, explaining exactly how he orchestrated the destruction. He coldly explained exactly how he poured gasoline all over the floor, struck a lighter, and calmly walked away to buy a drink from a nearby store while the house erupted into flames. After finishing his live interview, he simply walked over to the police officers securing the perimeter and confessed to them as well. The overpowering stench of raw gasoline soaked into his clothing and the lighter found right inside his pocket provided all the evidence the police needed to slap handcuffs on him immediately. But what could possibly drive a man to burn down his own residence, especially knowing his own mother and several other people were inside? When investigators peeled back the layers of his life, they found a tragic descent into severe mental illness. Carlos was battling deeply unmanaged schizophrenia and severe alcoholism. His grip on reality was entirely fractured. In his twisted state of mind, he actually believed that committing this massive act of arson was a heroic deed. He thought that burning the house to the ground was the only way to force the media to expose the poor living conditions inside the home. By an absolute miracle, his mother and the 4 other residents managed to escape the raging fire just in the nick of time, avoiding a massive tragedy. But the surreal image of a man casually admitting to arson on live TV, while the evidence burned fiercely right behind him, remains one of the most bizarre and chilling broadcast anomalies ever recorded. For our final story, we step back to July 27, 2007. The city of Phoenix, Arizona was practically shut down as a high-octane police pursuit unfolded on the scorching pavement below. A suspect had stolen a heavy flatbed pickup truck and was recklessly smashing through traffic, even reversing into a police cruiser in a desperate bid to escape. It was the kind of adrenaline-fueled chaos that news stations thrive on. Within minutes of the chase beginning, the sky above Phoenix became a crowded, buzzing airspace. 6 different helicopters converged directly over the suspect. 1 belonged to the police, and the other 5 belonged to competing local news networks, all desperate to get the best, tightest shot of the action for their live broadcast. Millions of residents were glued to their screens watching the criminal ditch the truck and start running on foot. The news anchors in the studios were talking a mile a minute, excitedly narrating every single movement. But as everyone's eyes were completely locked on the ground, a catastrophic oversight was happening thousands of feet in the air.
We don't know what has just happened right there. It looks like the police have closed in on him. We don't know.
Without any warning, the live video feeds from 2 of the major news networks simultaneously glitched and went entirely black. In the studio, the anchors were confused, stammering, and trying to understand what technical failure had just occurred. But this was no technical glitch. Above the city, 2 of the massive news helicopters had drifted too close and violently slammed into each other mid-air. The horrific sound of shredding metal echoed through the sky as the crippled aircraft plummeted toward the earth, exploding into a massive fireball upon hitting the ground. The tragedy was absolute. Both highly experienced pilots and both of their dedicated camera operators were killed instantly on impact. The news anchors, who were just excitedly reporting on a car chase, suddenly found themselves breaking down on live television, completely paralyzed by the realization that they had just watched their own close friends and colleagues die in real time. But how could 4 highly trained professionals in 2 different aircraft let this happen? The The subsequent investigation by aviation authorities revealed a terrifying reality about the news industry at the time. When multiple helicopters cover a single event, traditional air traffic control is essentially useless. Pilots operate under visual flight rules, meaning they rely entirely on their own eyes to avoid crashing. But these men were doing the impossible. They weren't just flying helicopters, they were operating heavy machinery, manually tracking a fast-moving target on the ground, monitoring police scanners, talking to their studio directors, and live reporting the events to the audience, all at the exact same time. The cognitive overload was massive. For just a few critical seconds in the overwhelming chaos of the chase, they lost spatial awareness, and those few seconds were enough to end 4 lives. This devastating day forced an immediate and massive change in the television industry. Today, when a major event happens, competing news stations are required to share a single pooled helicopter feed. This tragedy ensured that no pilot would ever again have to risk their life in a crowded sky just to get breaking news on your television screen. Outro Live broadcasts are a mirror reflecting the world in its most raw and unfiltered state. They capture our triumphs, our local events, and our breaking news. But as we've explored today, they also have the terrifying potential to capture the darkest moments of human depravity and sudden inescapable tragedy, all unfolding in real time without a script. Which of these unsettling live TV moments left you the most disturbed? Let us know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you want to dive deeper into the mysteries that hide in plain sight, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Turn on your notifications so you never miss an upload. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay safe, and we will see you in the next video.